My name's Anthony Anderson. I have a company called Grow Paradise. I've been grafting for about 6 years recreationally and then 3 years seriously. I've been playing around with different techniques, and in the past couple of years have really found some huge steps to get you to 90 to 100% success rate. One big part about this is the timing of the month and the timing of the day, and especially with high tide and low tide. There's an app called Tide Times or Tidal Charts on your phone. It's indispensable, and it'll tell you high tide and low tide 4 times a day. Take your scions at the high tide of the day, because that's when all the energy is going up into the plants, and then we'll attach them at the very next low tide, which is usually 5 or 6 hours later. And another big one that I got tuned into was the lunar chart. So you always want to harvest your scions as the moon is ascending, as it's becoming fuller. We'll do all of our grafting in like a 3 or 4 day period of the month. And your success rate goes way up and you don't waste your time. Especially since we're working with plants so much, tuning into the natural cycles of the earth and how these subtle energies are happening all around us. By applying those principles, you'll see your success rate go way up. One of the big things is your scion selection. You're trying to find that perfect Goldilocks scion that's not too young and not too old. So here's 2 avocados. Just notice the differences in the buds. If you pick it too far along, it just doesn't seem to catch right. You want to catch something that's still just about ready to burst. Often the scions that you're looking for are going to be further up. You want to find something that's higher on the tree if possible, because it's absorbing more sunlight, and something that's usually on the south side of the tree that's getting a lot of sunlight exposure. The lower ones, they're easier to collect, but they're not going to have that same solar energy, it seems. You want to keep them moist. So sometimes you're going to harvest maybe a dozen in the field or 20. Instead of wrapping them individually, we usually like to just put them in a 1-gallon plastic bag with a wet paper towel. And make sure it's pretty sanitized. You know, you want to wash it out beforehand. You don't want to really get any bacteria in there. If possible, wear gloves. Plant surgery, you know, you really want to be sterile with it. And then you're going to take all the leaves off, but leave a half a leaf right on the tip. It works as like a little solar panel, and it'll just stimulate things a little bit more. You want to leave a little bit of a leaf stem just as a guard, so when you wrap it with the parafilm, you don't budge the bud. So it just acts as like a little shield. And then we're going to wrap it with the parafilm. Start from the bottom and go upwards. And then with your index finger and your thumb, you just pinch it. And then with your right thumb, if you're right-handed, you just stretch it. And as you stretch it, it'll stick to itself. So we're basically creating a little greenhouse right around this stem. It's going to keep moisture in, keep bacteria out. You don't have to overlap much. You want it to be fairly thin. The avocado, I learned that you have to make little slits over each bud for it to grow through. Otherwise it'll smother, it won't go. Put these little clear plastic bags around it, and then you just put a rubber band around the base, so you create like a little dome like that. This is called the citrus bag, and I believe it's 2 gallons. Fill it full of your planting material, put your seed in there to start. When it's finally going and it's ready to graft, you're gonna look for about pencil width thick or maybe even Sharpie marker. If it's thicker, it's a little bit easier to work with. This is your 1/2-inch ag tape, and you wanna get it ready, just like that. So then when eventually we make it, we can just slide it up and pull it tight. You're going to want to find this happy balance between thinness to get in here and not split it too wide, but also thick enough where it's still strong. A lot of times too in the field, you're just going to have all these scions, and then when you start to do this, the very end has started to oxidize. You want to make sure you cut that end off, because there could be bacteria and fungus already in there. We've got this scion ready, so now we work our way into the rootstock. You want to go directly above it, and then just with a rocking motion back and forth. And then you feel it out. I could make this a little thinner at the tip, and sometimes you might want to rotate it. And it really only has to match up on one side. It doesn't have to be both. So if your scion is a little bit thinner or thicker than your rootstock, it's not the end of the world. You can still match them up. One trick that people like to do is just angle it a little bit. That way, somewhere in that diagonal, the cells are going to match up. And we've got this ag tape already here, and we just slide it up. To make it a little bit longer so I can loop it multiple times. And this is where it comes very important that it's a 1/2 inch and not a full inch thick, because tying this in knots would be almost impossible. So then I just cut off the excess, and then we cover the wound with parafilm. Post care, you're going to want to keep it out of the rain. You actually don't even need to give it water for a couple weeks because you're taking off all the leaves anyways. So at least 2 weeks without water. You want to make sure that it's still moist though. You want to put them in some light, but not getting totally blasted with direct light. If you can store it at 80 degrees, you're going to see a lot better success. And don't unwrap everything too soon. If everything's going according to plan, the leaves don't change. They'll just stay green and they'll hang on the tree. And then eventually the buds will just pop out. It's a little bit of a process, but within 2 months, you've got yourself a grafted tree.